Hello, I am Michele Leclaire, Executive Director at Buckham Gallery. Today, I am joined by Kelly Boehmer, whose exhibition, Beastly Luster, is on view through August 28th. Additionally, her work may be viewed online on our website, buckhamgallery.org. First, I would like to say thank you to the individuals and organizations who support Buckham Gallery, including the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Greater Flint Arts Council Share Art Genesee Grant Program made possible by the Genesee County Arts Education and Cultural Enrichment Millage Funds. Your tax dollars at work. All right. An introduction, Kelly Boehmer has exhibited and performed her work nationally and internationally. She received her BFA in studio art at the Maryland Institute College of Art and her MFA in studio art at the University of South Florida. She is a member of the performance art band Glittery. Kelly is a professor of foundations studies at Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. Welcome, Kelly.
Hey.
So Beastly Luster explores the absurd beauty in anxiety using teeth from upcycled taxidermy and gory visceral imagery. Boehmer symbolizes emotional vulnerability. So welcome, and I'm so happy to have you here today with us and your work in Flint, Michigan.
Thanks for having me.
So I would like to start with the title of your exhibition, Beastly Luster. What do you mean? What is Beastly Luster?
I think when I came up with that title, I was mainly thinking about the puppy that's there on the screen, and thinking about kind of how those two words seem to have a fun contrast of something that's sparkly and shimmering, but then also kind of creepy and grotesque. And so I think mainly that piece I kind of had in mind with the title.
Yeah, well, I can bring up another image of that one right here. Well, you can see exactly. My assistant and I had a lot of fun with the detail shots because there is just so much going on with these incredible sculptures. So maybe with this, would you discuss some of the themes in your work?
Yeah. I think with this piece, first of all, I got the image as a starting point from Jeff Koons's puppy.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of have a love-hate's pretty strong, but I kind of have this love-hate relationship with him, where and that attraction repulsion is something I'm interested in general. But his huge puppy that's covered with flowers, I wanted to use as a starting point, and this is covered with hand-sewn flowers and synthetic flowers, and glitter, but then of course the mouth is this taxidermy alligator head, and it's also got handmade teeth and Halloween zombie teeth layered in, and so there's just all of these layers and layers. But the alligator heads are just something you see everywhere here in the South, and also kind of these colors too. Something about it is very Florida and Savannah and the places I've lived.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point right there. There's a very handmade element to this. This is not just, something like that would seem like store-bought and fabricated. This is very made. There seems to be like experimentation, and you're not even trying to hide it because you have the exposed threads, as we will see as we go on, which is really incredible. And because there is a very handmade process in the loose thread, so it's not like trying to match the thread with the fabrics, and hiding that process. You actually are using the red. Could you talk about maybe your process and choices with material.
Yeah, because I really love showing the stitch. I mean, like you said, it's kind of like when you see drawings with expressive marks.
Mhm.
I really love that where you see the artist's hand there and how that's almost like their signature. But typically with textile art, you don't see that. It's perfect and pristine. And so I really like playing with that. And kind of subverting your expectation of it being perfect and clean and well crafted. Instead, it kind of looks like it's hanging on by a thread. It kind of looks like
Yeah.
emotionally falling apart, but also physically kind of falling apart. And you can tell too, like somebody sat with that piece and made it by hand, and you can kind of see the love and time put into it in a different way when you show that. But and the piece you have up there right now, it also has the sheer organza too, and that is kind of similar to the thread. It looks really vulnerable. It's not a sturdy fabric. You can
Mhm.
see right through it. And I really like playing with materials like that too.
It does blend that vulnerability as like tissue, like skin tissue
Yeah,
thin layer, and then you can see the organs and developing what pupas or whatever it is, underneath this shell. Yeah, it's really intriguing. Yeah, it really makes an incredible depth to the work, I think. Yeah. Is there a connection between your message and the way you were working, your working process?
yeah, because that idea again of being able to look at something that's so vulnerable, I think kind of can give it empathy from the viewer. They
Mhm.
can maybe emotionally connect more because it looks some of them look a little scary and intimidating, but they'll look a little pitiful and sad and funny too sometimes. And I just really like that emotional mashup. But then there's this material mashup that's happening also, where okay, there's these vulnerable fabrics, but then the teeth of the upcycled taxidermy. So I'm trying to kind of combine these emotional ideas and these different materials all together. And the process too, I mean, I'm constantly sewing all the time to make these because just hand sewing takes so long. So I'll pack a little bit with me in my purse everywhere I go, and I kind
Yeah.
of take it with me. And so people will see me at the restaurant or wherever I am, just sewing a little bit or in the car. And there's something about that process and kind of always having the sculpture with me that I think starts to kind of come through in the work.
Yeah. Oh, that's really fascinating. We often see someone who will like crochet or out in
Yeah.
public or even sketch in their sketchbook, but you not really the um, sculptural sewing. So that's fascinating. Oh, I love that. I want to bring up some of those upcycled teeth you have with like gutless in here. Um, and these are shark, I believe. Yeah, wow. And our lesson appears somewhat amphibious. And could you maybe tell us a little bit about the sculpture and your decisions here?
Yeah, this one, I mean, you're right. It's kind of remembering back to when you had to dissect a frog in school, but then also just kind of as a metaphor for when people tell you you're going through this painful circumstance and oh, you're going to learn something from it. And
Mm,
I don't know if that's always a comforting thing to hear as a person. I don't know if you feel that that's maybe what you need to hear in that moment. And so this is kind of questioning that. And and then also having this weird nostalgia. I mean, I usually use art history as a springboard or as this iconic thing to play off of. And here I just wanted to use that dissected frog that everybody's had to experience. And this little thing went through pain, so I'm supposed to learn from it. And it just kind of brings that comparison together a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I should say too, the materials around the shark mouth, there's a gorilla glue, and I liked how it started to kind of foam up and almost looking like
Oh,
the thing
yeah.
foaming at the mouth. And so that was kind of another fun material I like to experiment with. And a lot of the taxidermy too, kind of, I'll end up getting it from friends. They kind of see that I do this work, and all of a sudden they'll say, "Oh, maybe you can do something with this," and they'll bring over something. And it's this weird thing where I'm excited. I'm like, "Oh wow, this is great," but also kind of grossed out. And so it's kind of like a cat when they bring you something dead and you're like,
Mm.
"Oh," they want you to be happy, but you're also kind of grossed out by it. But then I'll it ends up inspiring a whole piece. So that's often also this springboard and this thing that gets a piece started.
Yeah, well, I kind of wondered about that. If you went to like flea markets of stuff and we're finding old, taxidermy, or if people just start sending them. I just a month or so ago spoke to one of our past artists, Jim Arndt, and he does the denim portraits, and people we'd send him denim, which he then makes a sculptures out of. Yeah. Well, talking about beauty and unsettling, growling stomach is both beautiful and very unsettling when you look into it. Because here you have your taxidermy alligator mouths and maybe others in this what appears to be it comes across at least as more of a pregnant belly.
Oh, yeah.
Or viewers have taken it as such. Whether that's your intention or not, I don't know.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is that maybe not your intention there, or?
I think like when I was making this, it was actually honestly during COVID, and I was having some weight gain. And I was thinking about you know,
Oh, yeah.
I'm worried about this kind of superficial thing. And a lot of people were dealing with that then. But then also, a lot of people were waiting in lines at food pantry. And I was thinking, oh, this, I need to not worry about that. But also those feelings are real. They're
Yeah.
visceral feelings you have. And so kind of that struggle, even though it's kind of a struggle from privilege, is just something I was thinking about. But I think that idea of it almost that idea of something being pregnant and that kind of vulnerable state isn't a bad association. I think that's really great that people saw that in it too.
Yeah. Because you have all the again, that sheer material and the beauty and the sheer and shimmery, and you can even see what appears to be bone, the rib cage bones up in the top, and these beautiful, your tentacly kind of like things. Yeah, we love all of that. Soft sculpture is so fun. You've made it so fun. Yeah.
It looks kind of huggable. I mean, it's scary, but also approachable.
Yeah, definitely. So you did talk a little bit already about hand sewing instead of, or about using hand sewing, but why do you choose that instead of maybe using a machine?
Yeah, because a lot of people ask about that. They say, oh my gosh, it would be so much faster if you would just use a sewing machine. And I think for a lot of artists that works really well. But I think if I was doing it, it would be like using a microwave to cook. And it would be quicker, but just not necessarily better in my hands, I think. And again, for me, I kind of want that handheld thing. but also the extra time. I kind of like that it's this hurdle and it makes me slow down a little bit and kind of have to reflect more. I remember watching this video and they had William Kentridge and he was doing his charcoal animations. And of course, they would be so much faster if he just used a computer. But he liked that he had to kind of slow down and reflect and take that slower route. And I think it's that time and thought that goes into it that just ends up being important. And then just formally, I like the tension. I mean, there's something when I can pull on the fabric and really do that with my hands, it becomes very physical. Where if I'm just sitting at a machine, there's this kind of cold thing that's separating it from me that is just very regular, and doesn't have that tension that I really want to get.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, on one hand, I guess the materials that you choose to work with also wouldn't lend themselves to the machine process. But that you brought up something really interesting. It was about the time you spend, like what kind of time are you investing in a work? And are you able to do several at a time, or do you just like focus on like one project?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like to have several at a time. I like to kind of have lots of different pots going at once. And kind of leave something up on my studio and I can just look at it and see what does this thing need. But a smaller piece like the pony, it might take a week. But other pieces might take a month or several months. Even if I'm, starting out with a little start from another sculpture. So a lot of times I'll take something old that I've made and kind of cut it up and make new work from it. Kind of the same way that I'll take the taxidermy pieces and bring those in and use that as a starting board. I'll use kind of an old sculpture and cut that up and make something new out of it. And that kind of started as a practical thing of I was making these huge fabric pieces and there was just nowhere to put them. And so I just kind of started, but now I like that, kind of like the puppy, it has gone through so many different versions that the mouth starts to get kind of worn and the materials themselves start to kind of tell a history of they've been through something. They don't, like you said, they don't look just fresh from the store. Like
Yeah.
I
I can bring that one back up too. Yeah, there's so many elements. So this was actually made out of from other sculptures then, or it has changed and evolved throughout the way? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's been a unicorn. It's been all these different things. And you can even see it's like the mouth is kind of starting to droop and the leather is kind of starting to like crack around the mouth. And I don't know if I could just do that on my own fresh for a sculpture. It almost kind of just has to go through that process. And in a way too, it kind of gives me this objective distance of these aren't these precious objects. Because I think, oh, I'll probably just cut it up later and not get too attached. It's so much more about the process for me than just a product at the end.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because you think, often students going through, even in art school, every drawing, whatever, it becomes this like precious thing. And then, 20 years later, like, oh my gosh, why do I still have this? but to think, at this stage, to still be willing to upcycle, sacrifice the work and then upcycle it into something else, it's beautiful. I mean, it's a great sentiment. Yeah. And really fascinating because you don't really hear about that happening too much with art.
Yeah, I mean, and some of my favorite artists will just have that though. I mean, it sounds like a weird comparison here, but I really like Andy Goldsworthy's work.
Oh, yeah.
And just how much time and all the little parts, and I just love that. But he's just completely not attached to it. There's all he ends up with is a photo, and I just think there's something really beautiful in that. It's just this temporary thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. To be able to just let go, to spend that time and then let go. Just great. You have already mentioned several artists, more contemporary, but here with Arnolfini's lapdog is a reference to the wedding portrait, correct?
Yeah.
So how, I mean, what a great evolution of this, this historic piece. Can you talk about pulling from art history?
Yeah, because I love using that just as a starting point. And when you do that, it sets these parameters and these boundaries of, okay, I know I'm going to use bright green and red, right from the beginning, but also themes too. And it gave me this fun bit of research, and everything I had heard about that piece starting out was wrong. There's all these interesting mysteries and theories behind that work, and I actually loved doing the research for it while I was working on it. And so I had heard, oh, it's this wedding portrait. And then there were all these other theories of, no, this is an engagement photo, a painting
Right.
that people doing, and to kind of commemorate that moment, and just all of these different ideas that were there that were not what I thought about, and the different viewpoints of what does it mean? Is it about this couple and them coming together on an equal plane, or was it about him he has this really interesting hand gesture, and is it him kind of putting her in check, or is it him kind of like embracing her? And there are just so many fun symbols, but the lap dog, the little dog, is such a money symbol in the piece. It was kind of what a lot of the authors said, that this is not a guard dog. It was just like a little tiny dog, kind of like dogs you see people carry in their purse, like that kind of dog. But I kind of wanted to make him a little more fierce than that, and a little edgier, and not just a status symbol in the relationship. And so I kind of took all that beautiful red that he has in the painting and made it more gory and more grotesque, and kind of just this way to talk about vulnerability in relationships. But I think you could also just look at it as just like this beauty and grotesque coming together. If you maybe didn't know the whole art history behind it, I hope people could still kind of get that from it.
Well, and the question is what is the lapdog attacking there?
Yeah.
What is that?
And you don't know, is it did he come after the couple? Did he turn on them? Or and again, I kind of just wanted to celebrate the mystery behind the piece. It seemed like just the more I studied about it, the more I just didn't know and wasn't sure about it. And I thought that was great. And it kind of just led me to picking a piece from art history that was mysterious to me. Or kind of like with the Jeff Koons piece, it was, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if I love it or if he kind of freaks me out. And so I don't pick pieces from art history that I just love. I want to have some kind of complex relationship with it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And it takes it so much past just, doing like a study of the work, and really that I love that investigative process you went through and this sort of evolution on it. It's definitely a scary laptop.
Yeah, I guess I'm more of a cat person. I love dogs too, but
Yeah, that's funny. Um, well, how did you start working with fabric?
oh well, actually, now that we have this piece up, I love painting, and I started out as a painter, but I when I went to grad school, I was painting, and it's such a intense focus study there, um, but it wasn't working. And I was just pouring hours in, and it wasn't producing anything interesting. And my colors were really dull and sad, and I was struggling. And so all of a sudden, I had visiting artists and professors tell me, why don't you try something different? Just try, try a different process, try a different material. And I started sewing into my paintings a little bit and just adding little bits of embroidery. Um, and all of a sudden I wasn't scared of color anymore. All of a sudden it was different than a tube of paint with color. All of a sudden having a bit of yarn or thread that had this existing color, I didn't shy away from it. I kind of felt like I knew all these rules of painting, but I didn't know the rules of soft sculpture. And so I just kind of got to make them up a little bit. And that
Yeah.
was really fun and scary too. And I kind of liked that nervous discovery. And the challenge now for me is kind of just bringing that, keeping that
Mhm.
sense of discovery and that fun, nervous tension.
Yeah, there is a freshness and in kind of in like that handmade sense that we had talked about before, that feel, rather than the hidden stitchery and everything. So before you started sewing into your canvases, had you done much sewing before? No.
No, I mean, it's funny. It's like you would never want me to sew you clothing or something proper. And I do like to do weird costume design and stuff for a performance art, but never something traditional. It I had done some crafts, and my family has always been really supportive and always had kind of artsy craftsy stuff going on, but again didn't know the proper ways to do it. It was always kind of something I did as a kid that was fun and playful.
Mhm. Yeah, let me bring up this one too, because this is a really one of the more massive pieces that we have here in Flint, with the very um, all the stuffings. Do people send you like random fabrics as well? Yeah.
Yeah, especially I love kind of the scrap ends of yarn. Sort of like I like the scrap pieces of taxidermy. I like the ones that are sort of off or not or damaged or old and kind of vintage and beat up. I mean, I kind of like the same with fabric. So a lot of people that knit, they'll end up with this little piece that's an end that they can't do anything with, and I like kind of stuffing that into the sheer fabric. And it I really love how it starts to look like this visceral, kind of intestinal, feeling that you get from looking at it, and that it almost feels like it's moving when you look at it. I mean, there's something kind of alive about it.
Yeah. This piece is also a lot of fun. Visitors to the gallery have, the fingers crossed, you see people figuring it out. We do also. But people have seen legs or chromosomes. People have asked if it's chromosomes, and kind of, it's interesting because it's something so simple that could be, viewed in different ways depending on with the position where you are coming from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because it could be hopeful Or also
Mhm.
you'll see little kids like with their hands behind their back, crossing their fingers. I like that you can kind of meet this on your own level and how you want to read it. But and with this piece too, I've seen people sneak up and try to touch it, and there, there's something funny to me about even artists I know that know, okay, in a museum, in a gallery, the number one rule is you don't touch the art, and they'll do it. It's There's something about fabric where you just have to go touch it, that I think is really great.
Yeah. Oh, I love this one. And we're excited to see on your uh, Instagram, you have, this is not the first one, Love Bite. No,
Yeah,
so
my
this is,
friend has the other one.
oh, wow. Um, so it's a ferocious love bite. It seems like a very dangerous love bite.
Yeah, I think with a lot, kind of like with the Arnolfini piece, I thought a lot about vulnerability in relationships. It was something I kind of kept going to in pieces that I was looking at. I mean, a lot of the artwork has imagery about death, and it just, these are all our big fears, right? About being lonely, or heartbreak, or fears of death. But I kind of want to look at those in a funny way too, not just, oh, this is scary, or oh, this is terrible, but maybe that there's something kind of pretty and funny about all of that, that's what we all go through, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, this guy's scary, but he's also all kind of, again, it's that messed up taxidermy, so his nose is kind of crinkled and off, and I just, there's something relatable in that for me, that makes it, I mean, it's approachable too. I mean, it's not that big of a piece, and so I like that mix of it's scary, but it's also at the same time kind of pitiful in a way.
Well, it's fantastic. Yes. I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Okay, so how has the pandemic changed your studio practice?
Okay, I mean, it's interesting. It has and it hasn't. You know, it's this. My studio is in my house, and so in a lot of ways, I mean, it did give me more time and focus. And I think for a lot of artists, they got more reflective about what they were doing in their process. Um, but it did kind of take away that thing of me taking a little bit of my materials with me everywhere I go and trying to do little bits here and there. And it turned more into just focused work and not so spotty. And it was just a different way to focus on a sculpture and to kind of dive more in. And but I think it made me really happy that my studio's here in my house, and I can kind of just work whenever and kind of have that comfort when I go into the studio. One of my little secret weapons in the studio, because all artists get that inner critic, and you kind of get nervous when you go into the studio. And for me, I'll sit in the studio, but I have a chair next to me. My cat comes and sits right next to me while I'm working. And there's just something so calming about, I'll look over and Sparkles, my cat, will be sitting there. And it, you know, that even during the pandemic, you know, was just kind of a sense of calm of, I can work here and be settled in my house and be able to enjoy that process.
Yeah. Did you, well, since before you were always taking it with you and working out and about, did it feel at all claustrophobic, kind of being stuck at home with your work then at
A
all?
little bit, yeah, and I was
Yeah.
kind of surprised about that. You know, that in a lot of ways, like you were saying, people are used to seeing somebody kind of knit or have something with them when they're out and about. But for me, I'm kind of an introvert, and I don't really connect with people. I'm not outgoing that way. But I love to talk with people. And sometimes people would see me sewing, and they would come up to me and say, "What is tell me about what you're doing." And it was a nice way to talk to people. And I kind of missed that connection in a way that I didn't have just in my studio space. And also I really miss seeing art in person. I just got back from New York and got to walk around all the galleries, and I was like, oh my gosh, I miss this so much. And that was really great.
Oh, I know. It's been so hard. And you know, in many ways during the pandemic, it was great that we were able to have these, you know, online platforms to reach new audiences, and we added, you know, the online viewing rooms to help, but it's nothing like being able to connect with work in person and have that experience standing in front of something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it helped me appreciate it more, I think. So that was something good that came out of it.
Yeah. So you are also a professor, you know, so you teach young students or college age students. You know, how has this impacted your work?
Um, well, I think a lot of people, if they aren't into that and they aren't professors, might think, oh, this takes time away from your studio practice. Um, but actually, you're really just hanging out with artists all day and talking about art and their ideas. And I'm in foundations, and so it's their first year, and they don't have this preconceived idea of exactly what their style is or what their technique is. And there's just wonderful openness to just trying out new stuff, and this excitement when you do that. And I think back to, I used to wait tables when I was in college, and there's something about that where you're carrying people's food and you're looking at all this food all day and you get starved by the end. And now when I'm walking around in a classroom looking at this art all day, and I think, oh my gosh, I just want to get home to the studio and work. And it kind of just it brings this different energy to the studio practice that I think it also kind of makes you accountable too. You think, oh, I've been telling them you need to spend time, you need to do your research, you need to do this and that. And I feel like, oh, I need to do these things myself and not just kind of give the rules out,
Right. Well, that's great, and that it's exciting and energizing. So that's really wonderful. So this wasn't on here, but I did want to ask you in the bio that I shared as your part of your introduction, we have this performance art band, Glitter Chariot. I imagine you haven't been real active this past year, but can you tell me about it? What is this?
Yeah, I can send you pictures of this too. But my husband's an artist too, but he's also a musician, and he is part of the band. He's one of the main people in the band, and I'm not musically talented specifically. But I love to perform and be part of this group. And I'll work a lot with the costumes.
Yeah.
But it's first and foremost a band, which is, we will real earnestly sing these heartbreaking love songs, but it's really grotesque to look at too. And so we'll use things like fake blood kind of as a metaphor for the heartbreak. And some of the imagery is a bit disturbing, but you hear the music and you hear like us going through these kind of active things about relationships again, And it's been really fun to work with because it's so different than my studio practice. Kind of collaborating, working with a group. And I don't know, there's just a different type of vulnerability in all of it. And we'll use, in a similar way to that, how I use the iconic imagery from art history, we use nostalgic imagery. So we have Bert and Ernie as characters as though they're real people.
Yeah.
And so you have that connection to it, to the imagery. All of a sudden you say, oh, I recognize that, but it's off. And it's been really interesting. I mean, we've made music videos and we've performed in galleries, but also dive bars, and just it's been such a fun experience. But it's so intimate that during the pandemic we have, it's been, I guess, at least a couple of years since we've done a performance, so we're really excited to try to do something soon. But it's very, we do one piece called the Whispered Duet, and we'll have one viewer sit in between two of us and we'll whisper, and so they're hearing it in stereo.
Oh, wow.
But then we'll also do shows where there's 14 of us on stage and it's just a big glam rock experience. So it's a lot of different forms. We could probably have a whole talk just about
that's interesting. How's this performance aspect then influenced your visual art experience and process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because actually the person that came up with the idea, the main guy in the group, was a former professor, and he started out as a ceramic artist, and so there is this sculptural element to everything we do, where the stage and even us as actors on the stage become like a sculpture at times, where, I mean, we'll do pieces like the Whispered Duet, but then we do other pieces where we don't act like the audience is there, and we're just a sculpture that you look at and listen to. And so we've kind of had different approaches with it depending on the space we're in and performing in. But I think those colors and characters and ideas about relationships and the vulnerability there is definitely impacted my work, and just having fresh voices and perspectives. I mean, I love that about collaborating, that there's this element of chance and you not having control over everything. And I think there's something really great about that.
There is, and sometimes a little nerve-wracking, but it ends up being a better thing.
More complicated, yeah.
How are you continuing with this work? Is it evolving or changing from, because I know this isn't, stuff you made last week, what are you working on now, and where are you going, I guess?
Well, I've been moving more towards the direction of like the fingers crossed and the puppy, where it's more of a freestanding sculpture. And I'm right now making this bug that's person size. It is bright pink, and it has his legs kicked up in the air. So I thought about it, and somehow it's this perfect image of how you would explain maybe death to maybe a little kid that didn't know what it was. This thing with its poor legs kicked up. And for me, trying to get that tragic comedy thing about death, it just seemed the go-to image. And I'm using that same organza and see-through material and yarn. So it still looks cuddly, but it's a giant bug. So it'll have that Kafka feel to it, but also be kind of more funny, hopefully.
Well, that what an interesting play with your work is because of that beauty and the grotesque and these, you know, again, macabre ideas and things with life and pink and shiny and stuff. It's really such a great tension. And why I love your work so much. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your work with our Greater Flint audience. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.